Welcome to the storytelling webinar. Could I just first ask if anyone, I think everyone has, but if anyone isn't on mute, if you could go on to mute now, just to cut out sort of background noise. It will be an interactive webinar, but we'll be using the chat facility for that primarily, and then at the Q&A at the end, by all means, then add in your kind of comments, questions then. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Martin O'Halloran. I'm Editorial Manager in International's Comms and Marketing Division. I write and edit content for a range of international communications, things like panda.org, the annual review, and the monthly Conservation Pulse newsletter. I'm also responsible for the global tone of voice, and I'm also here to support communicators across the network with their writing and editing. So in the next hour, we will be hopefully giving you inspiring ideas for your writing using the power of stories. And we'll also briefly introduce our global tone of voice principles. Today's session is going to be led by Neil Martin from a writing agency called The First Word. And I'm going to hand you over to him now.
Thank you, Martin. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're logging in from today. It's a real pleasure for me to be running this webinar. I've run about 4 or 5 of these now. And so, yeah, as Martin said, my name is Neil Martin. I work for a writing company based in London called The First Word. We've been working with WWF for about, I'd say, 4 years now on various projects. So things like brand tone of voice, which we'll look at. Also things like the annual report, which is out soon and has some fantastic stories in it written by lots of people, including the practice leaders. So do look out for that. So this is our office here, by the way. Don't worry about this guy behind me. This is a robot. This is our mascot at The First Word. He's there to remind us to write like human beings and not like robots. And we've got a lot of business speak on the wall as well, but it is just a picture. It's not going to come to life and eat me. So without further ado, I'm going to share my my slides with you now. So Martin, if you can just let me know that you can see.
I can.
The slides.
Yeah, I can see it fine.
Great. Okay, thank you. And I just need to. There we go. Okay, so today's session is called Facts Prove, Stories Move, and I will say a little bit more about that in a second. First of all, this is how I introduced myself. I said, hello, I'm Neil Martin from The First Word, etc., etc. I could have said hi, could have also said hey. I might have also said yo. Actually, I wouldn't have said yo because that'd just be embarrassing. I just wouldn't have said that, but someone else might have said yo. So what I'd like us to do, please, is just so that we get to know each other a bit and say hello, can you write in the chat box another way to say hello? So think of another word or phrase that means hello in any language. Just type it in the chat box, and it'd be good to see what you come up with. So immediately, I'm going to say this right now from the start. If I mispronounce your names, I'm sorry. Or any words, I'm sorry now. Okay, but feel free to laugh at me. But I'll do my best to pronounce them in the right way. But if I mispronounce them, I'm really sorry. So we've got hola, we've got oi, hola, buna, ciao. I'm not going to try and pronounce some of these, but hey, I can do. Tatiana, sorry, I can't pronounce that one, but thank you. And Marla, hello, salut, I can do salut. Great, right, hi everyone, thanks very much. Keep them coming in, feel free to add more. Throughout this session, I really want you to keep using the chat box, ask me questions, give me your thoughts. I'll try and answer them as we go, but there'll be a bit of a Q&A session at the end as well, in case we miss anything. So why did I ask you to do that? Well, 2 reasons. One, just to say hello. And secondly, to kind of make the point about what tone of voice is. You've heard me and Martin talk about tone of voice already. And tone of voice is simply, it's not what we say as an organisation at WWF, it's the way that we say it. So I'm not here today to talk about your subject matter. You know, I'm not here to tell you about what you're writing about. I'm here to just help you with the way that you write about it. And specifically, I'd like us to look at stories. So my aim for this session is simply to give you some inspiring ideas for your writing using the power of stories. It's not the only way to write, of course, but it's a really, really powerful one, particularly for what we do at WWF. As I say, get involved, write your thoughts and questions in the chat box, and there'll be a Q&A at the end. So let's start off then with this theme for today, which is facts prove, stories move. Now, facts are really important at WWF. That sounds like a really obvious statement, but we're going to be talking about facts a lot in the next hour. WWF is fundamentally a facts-based scientific organisation. It has to be, because everything we do has to be based on sound science for us to be credible. We can't speculate or make things up or make assumptions. We have to base what we do on science. But science and facts alone aren't enough for us as communicators. They don't do our job. You know, if they did, we wouldn't need people like you and me to write things. We need to bring these facts to life for people, and that's where stories come in. So facts will prove something, but stories have the power to move us, and when they move us, we act. And to prove that point, I want to tell you a quick story now, and it's about this guy. You may recognize him, you may not. I'll tell you his name. It's James Hansen. And in the 1980s, he worked for the Goddard Institute, which was part of NASA at the time. And he published a report in 1981, a groundbreaking report at that time that predicted that the 1980s were going to be one of the warmest decades on record. And he was right, and we know in hindsight that he was right about this. So he published his report, and then he did the same in the 1990s. And again, we now know he was proved right. It was a warmer decade than before. The problem that James Hansen had was that as a scientist, he felt that just getting facts out there into the world, facts and figures, would be enough to change people's behaviour. It would be enough to tell the world all of the research he'd done and all of his findings, and that would prompt people into action. But again, with hindsight, we know that didn't happen. And here's a quote from one of his colleagues, Bill McKibben, and quite a famous environmentalist. You may have heard of him as well. And this is what he said. I think Hansen thought, as I did, if we get this set of facts out in front of everybody, they're so powerful, overwhelming, that people will do what needs to be done. Of course, that was naive on both our parts.
Sorry, Neil, can I just interpose just for a second? I'm sorry to break your flow, but there's a lot of background noise. And would it be possible for everyone just to put their mute on? I'm afraid I haven't got host rights, so I can't actually do that, enforce it. But would that be okay? Thank you very much, and my apologies, Neil.
No worries. Okay. Yeah. Thanks, guys. I hope you could hear that. I'll just recap. So, I mean, you can read it here actually. So, Bill McKibben is capturing the problem that they faced, 30, 40 years ago, which was actually facts aren't enough to convince people to change their behaviour. They needed to do something with those facts. And I think for me, this speaks to something quite fundamental in human nature, that facts alone don't always move us. They don't always prompt us into action. So let's define what a fact is. Well, here's one way of defining it, or here's an example. The king died and the queen died. That's a fact. Okay, and unless we know the king or queen, or we feel something about them, then we're not necessarily moved by this, or this statement isn't in itself all that moving. But look what happens if we add an emotion into it. The king died and the queen died of a broken heart. We could say that this is a story because we've wrapped this fact in an emotion. The queen died of a broken heart. Suddenly it's moving to us because we've turned it into a story. So that's one way that we can think about the difference between a fact and a story. And if we take that one step further and think about what that means for WWF, we could think about it like this. A story is a fact wrapped in an emotion that can provoke us to take action to change the world around us. And this is the power of stories. You know, it's not that we're ignoring facts. No, we need facts. We need facts and figures to write about, to communicate, to tell, to let the world know what's happening. But on their own, they're not enough. We need to use our power as communicators to bring them to life for people. And that's what I'd like to share with you today. So I've got 5 tips for you on how you can use storytelling to bring facts to life. Let's say one more thing before I start with the tips. The reason that I feel that this is really important for us at WWF is that in the years that I've worked with the organisation, and I think your experience will be similar, is I've found that much of the communications and much of the writing is very, very fact-based, and I think a lot of it gets lost if it's always very, very factual. So let's see what happens if we try a different approach. Not all of it's factual, but a lot of it is. So the first thing we can think about is this. You know, when we think about stories, we think about heroes. They're one of the first things that come to mind. So use the chat box, please, and tell me, who is your WWF hero? Just type in, when I say WWF hero, who do you think of? Just type them in, please. It'd be great to get your thoughts. It can be a person, of course, but it doesn't have to be. A hero can be a thing as well. So tell me in the chat box, who are some WWF heroes? And then I will share some of my ideas with you as well. Great, thanks. So we have the guys tagging the whales in the Pacific. Yeah, one of the rangers in the field, and ranger again. Yeah, I think rangers and generally the people who are female rangers, yeah, who are the kind of the front line of protecting wildlife. Yeah, so that's four people have said ranger already. So that's the first type of hero that jumps to mind. It's quite almost a stereotypical hero really, but a very powerful one. I wonder if you can think of any other types of heroes, maybe ones that aren't so obvious. Yeah, we've got a WWF employee, Vinicius Pereira, that's creating CSAs in Brazil. Great. Scientists themselves are heroes. Yeah. Pavel, someone called Pavel, who still works with tigers after an accident. Yeah, seconded there. Pavel. Indigenous people, also Attenborough. Yeah, he's a very familiar hero to the environmental cause and the concept he personifies. Thank you for saying that, Laszlo. The concept that Attenborough personifies, because when we're thinking about heroes, in fact, any kind of character, we need them to be real people or real things. Just an abstract idea isn't very powerful for us. So we need real people in our stories. Yeah, people who walk the talk, as Rodolfo says. Great, okay, so some good examples there. I'll show you a few more as well. So here's a kind of a ranger or a tiger protector, a female tiger protector here. And this is maybe one of the first kinds of heroes that we would think of in WWF. As I said, they don't have to be, I guess, your stereotypical heroes. Here's a different kind of hero. And someone mentioned this earlier, actually. Someone mentioned a similar idea. Someone who's a victim turned hero. So it was December 2017, another typical day in the village. Vishnu was out in the fields cutting grass with her daughter's mother-in-law when suddenly she noticed that her companion was missing. All she could hear were the screams of leopard, leopard from a distance. I think we can fill the gaps in there. We know what happened. And here's a quote from Vishnu. I don't feel angry and I try not to think about it. My husband is a forest guard and through him I understand that it's the animal's nature to attack when vulnerable. It was probably fate's idea to let me live to tell this tale, not one of anger, but of tolerance for the wild. So a different kind of hero there, a hero through tolerance and actually through being a victim. Heroes don't need to be people. You know, sometimes the most interesting heroes can be living things, but different kinds of living things. Here I've got a story from National Geographic. Flowers can hear buzzing bees and it makes their nectar sweeter. So in this story, the flower is the hero. Sound is so elemental to life and survival that it prompted Tel Aviv University researcher Lilach Hadonay to ask, what if it wasn't just animals that could sense sound? What if plants could too? The first experiments to test this hypothesis suggest that in at least one case, plants can hear, and it confers a real evolutionary advantage. So, heroes are powerful characters for our stories, you know, real people and things, and equally villains are as well. So again, guys, in the chat box, could you give me examples of WWF villains? You gave me some good heroes. So how about villains? Who could we call a villain? Again, it can be a person or a thing. Lou says hunters. Yep, I guess, again, Brazilian politics or politicians, I guess. Poachers, yeah, thank you. Corporate greenwash. Yeah, Rodolfo, I'd say that's a villainous thing to do, but if we want to bring that to life, we need to personify it. So maybe someone who's involved in corporate greenwashing. Laszlo says hunters, I wouldn't say, rather poachers. Yeah, it depends. I guess that's a good distinction. Depends on what they're doing. Poaching is obviously illegal. So poachers, really popular choice there. And also, Marlowe said Trump. Yes, Trump is, I guess, one of the most famous villains of our time, particularly when it comes to the environment. Here's an article from the New York Times, Trump versus the Earth. So it's almost like a kind of a Marvel character, you know, a Marvel villain in this headline. Yes, Veronica, illegal miners, and Tessa says staff who waste fundraising money, wink. Yep, that's a type of villain, I guess. Naming no names. Yeah, okay. Similar to heroes, villains don't need to be people. They can be things. And just as I say that, Viviana said plastic. Yeah, this is getting a lot more media attention now. Like, we thought this was a brilliant invention, but plastic, you know, is a villain. And here we've got on the slide here, seashell souvenirs, beautiful natural things, but ones that are killing protected marine life. Yeah, definitely a good shout, Vivi. And Marlo says CO2. Yeah, a villain can be a thing. Indeed, your reader can be a villain. So here we've got a screenshot from WWF website. We have become the greatest threat to the health of our planet. So we're complicit here. We're one of the villains. That's an interesting way to think about what a villain is. And sometimes some things or some people walk the line between being a hero or a villain. So here's an example. This is from WWF. It's much more than your favorite t-shirt. It's happy memories of that music festival where you first bought it. It's your kids asking about the band on the front and your partner promising it got used as a rag by accident. Your favorite t-shirt made from cotton, memories and water. Of all the water people use, 70% is dedicated to agriculture. It's essential for the food we eat as well as crops like cotton. So, you know, we've got a kind of a villain and a hero here. So my first tip for you is, when you're thinking about a story, rather than starting with a fact or a figure, which is difficult for us to relate to, you know, as humans, we don't, you know, we have to translate that into real life. So to start with heroes and villains, find them, find interesting, different, thought-provoking heroes and villains. You don't literally call them a hero and villain, but just choose them and make your story. See what would happen if you started with those people or things. Okay, so for my second tip, in a moment I'm going to ask Martin to play a video, and in that video you'll hear this guy talking. He's an American author. Can anyone tell me who this is? Be impressed if anyone can get it. Yes, we have a winner already, Vonnegut. Well done. It is Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut, American author, as I say. Probably his most famous novel is Slaughterhouse-Five. It's brilliant. It's satirical. It's really funny. And the reason I'm showing you his face here is that he's got a really interesting way of planning a story, and it's something that we can all use. So, Martin, can I ask you to take over the screen if I stop sharing and play this video, please?
Okay, just give me a second.
Has created a body of work of startling eccentricity and universal appeal. His singular view of the world applies not just to his stories and characters, but to some of his theories as well.
Well, there's no reason why the simple shapes of stories can't be fed into computers. They are beautiful shapes. This is the GI axis, good fortune, ill fortune. Sickness and poverty down here, wealth and boisterous good health up there. Here's the very middle. Now, this is the BE axis. B stands for beginning. E stands for electricity. Now, this is an exercise in relativity, really, is the shape of the curves of what matters and not their origins. So we'll start a little above average, is why get a depressing person? We'll start the whole thing. We call this story Man in Hole, but it needn't be about a man, and it needn't be about somebody getting into a hole. But it's just a good way to remember it. Somebody gets into trouble, gets out of it again. People love that story. They never get sick of it. All right, not copyrighted. Another story, also a beautiful curve and easily fed into a computer, called Boy Gets Girl, but it needn't be that. Just a way to remember it. Start on an average day, average person, not expecting anything to happen a day like any other. Find something wonderful, just loves it. Oh, God damn it. Got it back again. People like that. Now, these are beautiful curves, and this gets a little complicated. As computers can now play chess, so I don't know why they can't digest this very difficult curve I'm going to draw for you now. And it so happens that this is the most popular story in our civilization, Western civilization. As we love to hear this story, every time it's retold, somebody makes another $1 million. You're welcome to do it. Now, surprisingly enough, I've said it's depressing. You know, people don't like stories about below average days and people. But we're going to start way down here. Worse than that, who is so low? It's a little girl. What's happened? Her mother has died. Her father has remarried a vile-tempered, ugly woman with two nasty daughters, big daughters. You've heard it. See? Anyway, there's a party at the palace that night. She can't go. She has to help everybody else get ready. She has to stay home. Now, does she sink lower? No. She's a staunch little girl, and she has had the maximum whack from fate, which is the loss of her mother. She can't go any lower than that. Okay, so the fairy godmother comes. Gives her shoes, gives her stocking, gives her mascara. Gives her means of transportation. Goes to the party. Dances with the prince, has a swell time. Boring, 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 boring. Now there's a slight inclination to that line as I've drawn it because it takes perhaps 20 seconds, 30 seconds for a grandfather clock to strike 12. Does she wind up at the same level? Of course not. She will remember that dance for the rest of her life. Now, she poops along on this level till the prince comes, the shoe fits. She achieves off-scale happiness.
Okay, Neil, back to you.
Thanks, Martin. Right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it's given you a different way of thinking about how to plan a story. So just tell me in the chat box now, please, before you write a story or an article, what do you do to plan? Do you write something? Do you write a list? Tell me what you do to plan. And if you've got any questions about what you've just seen, put them in the chat box as well. So I know that when I'm writing something, I'll often kind of create a spider diagram and just write some ideas around it. Actually, Lawrence just said the same thing, really. Mind map, yeah, good, thank you. Marlo says, write an outline for the story. Yeah, try to find a hook or an angle. Yeah, pick a main character to begin with, great, maybe like a hero or villain, or yeah, a character, and think of what to do with them. I'm going to stick with that actually because it's a really good way to use this idea, this arc. So I'm just going to show you a story from WWF. So if we take this as our character, here's our main character, this is Maya, and the story is called The Birth of Kata. Here's Kurt Vonnegut's story arc again. Of course, you don't have to follow this arc. You can create your own arc, but this is the classic one he used, and you take your character and then plot them along this journey. So like this. So when Maya first stepped into Kata, she came in with hope of forests where there were none. Her biggest impediment was an antagonistic community. So if you created a mind map, you've got all of these, you've got these ideas, you've got these kind of nuggets, this beginning of the story, you can plot them against the curve. And Maya's low point here is, as word got out, Maya came to know of people plotting to have her killed. There were only 3 people who came to her support initially. Seasons changed and the land soon came alive with the first sightings of wildlife. 17 years later, Kata received a complete facelift. 3,800 hectares of forests with more than 6,000 community stewards. So happy ending in this case. But like I say, you don't have to use this arc. You can create your own, see what it does. And you don't have to work chronologically either. You know, this curve can work in lots of different ways. Now, one question that a lot of people have had here about WWF stories is about hope, essentially. You know, do we always have to have a happy ending? Can we leave things on a really sad note? Do we always have to write about cute animals, or can we show wounded animals? Well, my take on that is that it's important to show people the state of the world as it is now. So don't shy away from difficult subjects and tragic stories. You know, do tell them. The one thing that we know at WWF and actually for all stories that move people is that they need some hope. They don't have to have a blissfully happy ending, but they do need some hope for people to act. Because when people have no hope, if they think it's hopeless, they won't act because they think there's no point, I can't change the situation. So however you want to create your story, whatever journey you want to take your readers on or take your character on, my take on it is that make sure that there is some hope in there if you want people to act on it. But the big point here is play around with your stories. Martin, did you want to add anything there about that point on optimism and hope?
I guess only that in the story we just in the work that we do, it's we can paint a picture of things being difficult at the moment. I mean, one of our key tasks, I think, is to try and make nature matter to people, and I think that's what we need to kind of really work at, and is a big block, I think, for our work globally at the moment. And so that's I guess the whole point of trying to get sort of more emotion in there, making it matter.
Yeah,
facts just don't do that.
Yes,
facts alone.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So yeah, first job is to really make people care, and that can be through something positive or through something sad, but there needs to be some hope in there if you want them to act. Okay, so top tip, just to sum that up, instead of writing a plan in a kind of chronological, facts-driven way, think about a character and take them on a journey. Draw a story arc, play around with different shapes and see what it does to your story and your character. Okay, so we've got a character, we've got a hero, maybe a villain as well. We know what journey we want to take them in. Now we really need to grab our readers. And we do that, of course, with our headlines. And there are lots and lots of different ways that you can write a headline. But again, headlines that are too factual will turn the majority of readers off in a split second. So I'm going to show you a headline now, and I'll read it out loud, and I'd just like you to use the chat box and tell me what you think of it. Just be honest. Proposed culling of 250 hippopotamuses by Zambia government poses threat to population dynamics on Luangwa River. Guys, tell me, what do you think about this? Is this a good headline? Is it interesting? So Tice says, too long. Marlowe's yawn. Yeah, that's my reaction when I read it as well. Too technical, says Spring. Sorry, Spring, I don't know. I can't tell you first name from that, but I agree with you. It's too technical. Doesn't get to the point. Someone says, Rebecca. Oh, yes, sorry, Rebecca. Thank you. Almost, and then Laszlo said, almost smells like an impact factor peer-reviewed article. I get a sense of what that means. I guess you guys know more about what that means than I do. And Emmeline's just said, what does it actually mean? And another question, why does it matter to me? Yeah, and if we're, as readers, we're asking these questions, then the headline's not worked. So I'm going to show you a different version of this from The Guardian. So it was the same story, but just told in different ways. How many hippos are too many? Proposed call raises questions. And then we've got the subheading here. By resurrecting a proposal to allow trophy hunters to shoot 250 hippos annually, Zambia stirs controversy. Give me your thoughts on this headline. What's the difference with this headline to the previous one? What techniques does it use? So personally, I mean, I prefer this one. Yeah, Emmeline says it's enticing. It doesn't give too much away. Good. I think sometimes people make the mistake with headline. They try and tell the whole story in the headline. Yeah, Ty says, makes you curious, intrigue, more oriented, yeah, hopefully reader orientated, tries to involve the reader, yeah, it draws us in. You know, we want to know more, and that's what your headline's job is. It's not to tell the whole story, it's to get you to the second line, and the second line has to get you to the third line. And a great way of doing that, and it's a really easy trick, is to turn a statement into a question. And that's what we've done here. So that's one type of headline. And Milena says, yeah, makes you want to read more. Yeah, that's, we are built. When we hear a question, we are hardwired to want the answer. Guys, I can just hear a bit of background noise. So if someone hasn't got their, if someone's not on mute, could you just pop it on mute again, please? Thank you. So we've got another headline here. This is from National Geographic. We made plastic. We depend on it. Now we're drowning in it. Sorry. Planet or plastic. What techniques are going on in this one? There's a few different ones. And I'll read the subheading as well. Oops, sorry. The material has made modern life possible, but more than 40% of it is used just once, and it's choking our waterways. Ty says, yeah, it's building up sentence by sentence. Good. Yeah, it does. I like that. Yeah, I like the way you've put that. Builds up, just like the plastic, and maybe that was the intention, actually. I'd not thought about that. Good, thank you. It uses, to build up, it uses a very common trick in writing called the rule of three. So you've got the repetition of the same word, which in this case is the word we. There's history in it. Marlowe's, yeah, I maybe just tell us a little bit more about what you mean by there's history in it, as in, it's almost, maybe is what you mean, there's like a story in the title itself. Because it goes from the past to the present. Yeah, good. Yeah, we made it past, now we drown it. Great, thank you. Planet or plastic? Does anyone know what technique and miracle material has made modern life possible? Yeah, so clear cause and effect. Yeah, it's really bold, really hard hitting. It uses we to imply us as well. We're all responsible. Great. Emmeline, thank you. Alliteration, planet, plastic, miracle material, made modern life. Good. So a lot going on in this headline. And again, some easy or some powerful tricks to take from it. One is the rule of three, the repetition, the alliteration as well. Good stuff. Thank you, everyone. And just one more to show you. This is from The Economist, buzzkill. And I always struggle to say this word, neonicotinoids can harm some bees. 2 studies show the risks from pesticides. So this headline has actually got something quite technical in it, but it's not written for a scientist. You know, we can engage with this. What technique's going on in here? It's in the first 2 words. Pun, thank you, Emmeline, you win. Buzzkill. So yeah, using an everyday phrase in a new context, that can draw us in as well. It can make us smile. And the thing it does here, I think, effectively, is it takes something quite technical and makes it a bit more light-hearted and a bit more relatable. Good stuff. So, tip for headline, you know, your headline is so important because it's the first thing your reader sees. So it's worth spending a bit of extra time on getting it right. I've just shown you a few ways of doing it. And I find these techniques, particularly words or a pun, as Emmeline said, just try them. What I tend to do is write the headline last. If you write it first, what can happen is you try and end up writing a story around the headline, whereas actually needs to be the other way around. And the other thing I do is write lots of headlines. So I say, I write a question, I write a bold statement, I try a pun. It doesn't matter if they're rubbish. You only need one, you know, but what that enables you to do is you build up a list of headlines and then you can choose the one that works the best. Okay, so really simple question here. I don't want you to think too hard about it. Tell me, what do you see in this picture, and what does it make you feel? So just type your thoughts into the chat box again for me, please. So what do you see here? What springs to mind? Jungle, yeah. River, nothing special in particular. Yeah, there's not really a subject here, is there? Peace, Roxana says, yeah. Nature, river in the rainforest with 2 tortoises, good spot, eagle eye. So yeah, this is what we see, I think, instinctively, and mosquitoes probably, yes. I guess this is not instinctively what most people would say. That, although it's technically correct, it's an intact forest landscape, or an IFL, is an unbroken natural landscape of a forest ecosystem and its habitat plant community components in an extant forest zone with no signs of significant human activity or habitat fragmentation, and of sufficient size to contain, support and maintain the complex of indigenous biodiversity of viable populations of a wide range of biota, genera and species and their ecological effects. So I had to Google a lot of that, and I'm not a scientist, so as you can probably tell, yeah, you know, for me to be able to understand what that says, I had to do a lot of research. But this is very meaningful to other scientists and people who know what they're talking about. Ellen says, yeah, but the forest isn't the main focus of the image. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. It's not the way that the shot's taken, it's not actually the focus. The reason I asked that question, what do you see, is that instinctively we don't tend to think of technical jargon when we see a scene like this. An intact forest landscape isn't generally what comes to mind, unless we are a kind of a scientist, or maybe you guys did start to think about, is this, you know, is this an intact forest landscape? That's an important habitat. So it's not that this is wrong or bad or anything like that. I think the point I want to make about this is that for the majority of people, if you're writing this to outside of the scientific community, this isn't going to bring this scene to life for people. It's not going to make anyone care about this landscape. So I'm just going to show you a different version of this now. Actually, no, before I do that, yeah, tell me how you would describe this landscape to a friend. Just give me an explanation. What would you say, rather than all of that scientific language? Rodolfo says simply, an amazing place. Yeah. Nature that hasn't been broken by mankind. Yeah, I like that. It's much simpler, and I can picture that. I like the word broken there. A quiet river in a hot season. Nice. Yeah, nice contrast. A beautiful forest without any human traces. Big trees and diverse. Yeah, good. And Anna Laura says, untouched beauty, paradise on earth. Yeah, so a wild place. And the suggestions that you're giving me here, and I've just asked you to think of them off the top of your head, they're not scientifically detailed and accurate as the one before, but it depends on our reader. And if you're trying to engage a non-scientific reader, then we have to sort of bring this to life for people to make them care. So one way we can do it is imagine that we're talking to a friend. Another way we can do it is to actually bring this to life for people by describing it. So I've got another version here. Sit on a log by the Madidi River in Bolivia at dusk, and you can hear what an Amazon forest should sound like. The music includes red howler monkeys, droning cicadas, and the unhinged excitement of elusive titi monkeys. Around your feet, the beach is crisscrossed by jaguar tracks and those of the pony-sized size tapir, a shy beast that, if you keep quiet, will saunter out of the forest and swim across the river. This is what scientists call an intact forest landscape. Because of their size, these areas have maintained all their native plants and animal life. What I like about this, and the reason that I wanted to share it with you, is that it doesn't ignore the technical description. So intact forest landscape is in there, but before it tells us that it's an intact forest landscape, it makes us care about it, and it does that by bringing it to life for us. Guys, tell me, what techniques are going on in this piece? How has the writer brought this to life for us? I'm not looking for anything particularly technical here. Just get your thoughts on how the writers brought it to life. Yeah, it takes them on a journey. It's a shared experience. Yeah, it puts you in the picture. You can feel what it's like to be there as well. Sound, yeah, good. It plays on all the senses. We can see it, we can hear it. Roxana says, first it brings elements that the reader can feel. And that's what we're trying to do here. The previous scientific description was very rational and very logical, and absolutely the right thing to write if you are writing to a scientist. But actually, if you want to make people care, we need to give them a sense of how it feels. Yeah, Stefani says it brings the reader into the forest. And I know that you guys experience, maybe not literally this place, but lots of places, beautiful places like this. And what I'd encourage you to do is, rather than describe them in technical terms, is to bring them to life for your reader and try and get them to feel, what you feel when you're in those places. And as you guys have said, bring them into the story. So just to sum that tip up then, if you want to avoid that kind of slightly cold, abstract scientific language, bring it to life and paint a picture for your reader. Use all the senses. All right, everyone, I'm just going to sum up the tips. I know that we've gone pretty quickly through these today. I hope it's given you some inspiring ideas for your stories. I'm just going to sum them up. So number one, the first thing that I think I'd really like you all to do the next time you write something is just ask the question, could I write a story? The answer is not always going to be yes. It's just one approach. But I think particularly at WWF, there's a tendency to think it just has to always be factual. You can always weave facts in like we've seen. But what happens if you write a story? So ask yourself that question, and don't assume that just because you've got a fact is going to be enough to interest your reader. Number two, as you did earlier, find heroes and villains, characters, real people and things. Try not to talk about things in an abstract, general way. Find real people and things that personify what you're talking about. So someone gave the example of David Attenborough earlier, and he personifies so much about the environmental cause. Find your own versions, find your own heroes and villains, and think of interesting, different ones. They're the ones that tend to grab our attention. Number three, take your reader on a journey. So, when you're planning your story and you've got the different elements, put them on draw a story arc like we saw in the video. What happens if you take them on this journey? Number four, use a bold headline. Try questions, statements, wordplay, puns. Just write lots of headlines, then choose your favorite. Show someone that you work with, show a friend, get their opinion, and pick one. And number five, bring it to life. So try and avoid that scientific language that actually I'm sure you guys all understand, not necessarily the intact forest landscape, but you'll all know the technical language of your area, and it's very easy for that to slip into your story. So just always make sure that you bring things to life for people in a way that they can really understand and really feel. So storytelling is just one of the techniques that you can use to bring your writing to life. But but there are lots of other helpful resources around that you can have a look at, and one of them is the editorial guidelines, WWF tone of voice, which is in the editorial guidelines, and I'll show you where to get that in a second. Just got the contents page here, and it's got all kinds of useful stuff in it, from writing for WWF to the tone of voice, which I'll touch on the next slide, plus all the specific things that you need to know, so names and titles, how we capitalize, tips on grammar and punctuation. So everything from the kind of big ideas and the creative approaches, like the tone of voice, to the specific things that I know that people have questions about. In terms of the tone of voice, we've got these three ideas. So be clear, be bold, be human. I'm just going to read what's halfway down on this slide, because I think it's really powerful. So what does this all mean for WWF? We need to fight to be heard. We need a clear, bold and human voice. We've touched on some of these ideas already in this webinar, but again, have a look in the guidelines, and there's more guidance on this. So be clear, our words need to be understood. We say only what we need to say. Our words and sentences are as simple as possible. Remember that you're often writing about technical subjects that are difficult for non-scientists to understand. If they don't understand what you can't do anything else. You can't inspire them, you can't motivate them. They have to understand it first and foremost. Be bold. Our words need to change hearts and minds. We need to get people's attention. We make a compelling case for action. And be human. Our words need to be trusted. We make WWF sound human. We speak like real people, not robots. So not like the guy who's behind me here. You're all human beings. I can tell that from one, looking at you, and also seeing what you write in the chat box here. So allow your personality to come through in the way that you write. Try not to let it get corporate, and try not to use that kind of scientific language, particularly when you're writing something that you want to use to inspire people. Cool, so we've got a little bit more time left there. So if anyone has any more, does anyone have any questions on anything that we've looked at today? I'm just going to pause for a second to let you have a think about that one. Okay, I've just seen a message in the chat saying from Marlowe's, we have to go. Thanks a lot. Thank you guys. If you haven't already gone, thanks. Thanks for joining in today. Okay, so after this session, Martin's going to send you all the tips from it by email, so you'll have a copy of all of that. The editorial guidelines that I've just talked you through, you'll find them on the BrandCom site on panda.org, so do go and have a look at that. There's lots of practical stuff there. If you'd like to test the clarity and the readability of your writing, you can do that on our website, and that's thefirstword.co.uk. You can just copy and paste any text in there, and it measures how clear or how confusing your writing is, and it gives you tips for making it more clear. And writing support, Martin is always on hand to help you with your writing. So if any follow-up questions, let him know. I know that he's happy to answer them and look at what you've written and give you some tips and some feedback on it. Just seen a question here. Any tips for social media posts? Might not be the right webinar, just in case. I don't know if there is another webinar on social media, but I can give you my tip. I think using a lot of the techniques that we've looked at today, I think the thing to avoid on social media is, again, just getting to just putting out facts all the time, you know, like statistics, and you know, people need a reason to care. So whenever you've got if you're putting a social media post out there and you've got a fact, just ask yourself that question: so what? Why would people care? You know, bring it to life in some other way. The question, so Rodolfo said the question tip works very well. yeah, at least in Spanish. I think it works well in English as well, actually. But yeah, good point. Draw people in. I often think of social media posts, particularly if you've got a link, a bit like headlines. Don't try and say everything. What you want to get people to do is engage with it, be interested in it, click through, share it. But yeah, asking a question is often a good tip there. Emily says, and make sure you give them something to do. Yeah, a call to action, and links are super important. Yeah, so use verbs, tell people what you want them to do. Good stuff. Right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for your input and thanks for your questions. If you've got any more after today, do contact Martin. His email's there. Here we have it on the slide. Thank you very much. My email's at the bottom as well. Let me know if you've got any specific questions there. So great. Thank you very much, guys.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. This is Martin back again as well. Thank you very much for your input today. Yeah, just stay in touch. Do get in contact if you've got any further queries with me. Absolutely do that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.